Lamar Jackson opened up on the NFL disrespecting him and talked about a lot of other interesting topics. There also was a big tight end room update for the Baltimore Ravens. All that and more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel, and as in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe as well. We're 5 days a week here on Locked On Ravens, so Monday through Friday, bringing you that daily Ravens coverage. We'll have shows all throughout this week as well. I know the 4th of July holiday is coming up, but we are going 5 days a week, as we always do. Never miss an episode on the show, dating back to 2019 on the weekday. So thank you to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners, and if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. Man, just with every week that passes, we are one more week closer to training camp, to the regular season, just, checking off those boxes, as I always say. But during this time, the players, they have their off time and they get a little relaxation in. They're obviously still working hard as well. We saw some clips, Zay Flowers working out, some others working out as well. So still getting ready for the year. But on the show today, in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the Ravens upholding the standard. Can they do that this season? The standard that a lot of teams before them have built in terms of Baltimore Ravens football. Second part of the show, we'll dive into some big Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews updates that kind of snuck under the radar for a lot of people because Jaire Alexander was signed like the day before this happened. Or maybe it was a day after this report dropped. But we're going to talk about that because it flew under the radar and it's important to talk about. And then in the first part of the show here, we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson opening up on the NFL, disrespecting him, and mainly going back to the combine. If you remember the combine story with Lamar Jackson, him being asked to play wide receiver, he went on with Kevin Hart through the LOL network. Kevin Hart has his ice bath, ice tub show. I'm blanking on the name right now, but Lamar and Kevin Hart, they linked up for this. This was teased for a while also. This was teased for months. I can't even remember. It might have been dropped right as the season ended or a couple months after, but this is something we've been waiting on. And by the way, we're still waiting on that Lamar Jackson self-interview that he did when he was trying to get his contract, but that's a topic for another day. So for those that don't know, Lamar Jackson at the combine was asked to work out both as a quarterback and as a wide receiver. Teams wanted him to do it, and if there are multiple clips of him standing at the podium during the combine and answering questions, and it was really question after question after question of him just being like, I'm not a wide receiver, I'm a quarterback. And, to kind of be disrespectful to a guy that's worked his whole life to be a quarterback and to, doubt him or put him in a box, put him in a category because of X, Y, and Z is disrespectful. So Lamar opened up on that, and he said that, it's what he's been waiting on. And this was again the interview with Kevin Hart. He said, "This is what I've been waiting on." So when I get to the combine, they're like, "Lamar, quarterback / wide receiver," and Lamar says, "I'm like, what the heck?" I'm like, "No, I'm thinking he was just being funny." And Lamar didn't know this guy, so he thinks he's just being funny. And the guy apparently goes, "Oh no, seriously?" And Lamar says, "Hell no, I'm playing quarterback." And this whole notion of Lamar being a wide receiver and, it's used in a derogatory way, obviously, towards Lamar. Oh, he's a running back. He's a wide receiver. But this is legitimately what teams thought of him. Not every team, obviously. I think the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken, were one of those teams. There were others as well that are slipping my mind. I think the Chargers were the most prevalent, or at least the one that got the most attention for asking Lamar to do it. But it's like Lamar was such a talented thrower, albeit he was raw. He was raw coming out of school. I mean, I think everybody is to a degree, right? But you saw Lamar win a Heisman and, put up great passing numbers. It's not like Lamar went out there and rushed for 5,000 yards a season and only threw for 1,500 yards on awful efficiency. He was awesome at Louisville, both as a runner and as a thrower. At his pro day, he was airing out these bombs down the sideline, right? Just awesome throws. And, to still put him in that category, we've seen it done over the years, and it still sits the wrong way with me when they do it to those guys. Look, if that's what a guy wants to do and change his position, and he has telegraphed that or he has said that's a different conversation, right? That is obviously up to the player. But Lamar obviously had no interest in playing wide receiver. He had shown on film, shown on tape, shown with his accolades. He backed it up. And so Lamar going on with Kevin Hart and, being open about it and kind of the whole process of how that went. And he's like, no, I'm playing quarterback. And he was adamant. He stuck by himself. He was true to himself. And I keep bringing up the word disrespectful. Well, because it was. That's the only word. I mean, there are probably others too, but that's the word I keep coming back to. It was disrespectful to even put wide receiver in the same sentence as Lamar Jackson. I mean, look at him now, right? You would never even think of having wide receiver Lamar Jackson. But the problem is you shouldn't have even thought about it back then either. And look, he's made countless teams, media members, scouts, general managers, coaches, whatever you want to, whoever. He's made countless amounts of people look silly, look dumb in their analysis of him, in putting him in that box. And he has become the player that I think, look, I was a big Lamar believer dating back to his days at Louisville. He had MVP potential. It was a matter of which team was going to take him, which team was going to believe in him, what situation he went to, and how Lamar made the most of whatever situation he was in. And he's done all of that. The Ravens believed in him from day one. They wanted him. They wanted to revamp their offense for him. It was perfect. We saw the Bills do the same thing with Josh Allen, right? These are young players that need a situation where they're going to be believed in. If Lamar went to a team and that team is like, oh, well, we like you at quarterback, but we might try to use you as like a wide receiver, gadget guy. Again, it's extremely disrespectful that you're even talking about that. But we saw the Ravens have plays for Lamar Jackson, right? Get him on the field, use him as a decoy, have him run some plays. But it was always the plan to have Lamar throw and run, to be a dual threat guy. And so kind of having that ability, getting him in the field for game action, it is different, the Ravens doing that, than that being the only thing that was planned for him, if that makes sense. So again, I can't even imagine being Lamar showing up thinking, oh yeah, all right, I'm going to show my stuff as a quarterback. Let's do this thing. I'm ready. And then, teams and, NFL people be like, oh, hey, quarterback / wide receiver. I'm sure like the heart sinks and they're like, wait, are you serious? And Lamar didn't think the guy was serious when I'm sure when he realized he was, he's like, what? Are you kidding? So just one of the many things that Lamar talked about with Kevin Hart. We'll kind of run through the other stuff here. He was asked by Kevin Hart about his viral moment from high school. And, if you were on Vine back in the day, or, you've been on social media, you've seen the clip of Lamar doing the back juke into the end zone. He walks in, does the hands down, puts the hands up for dropping the ball. Like, that was one of the most viral, not just sports moments, most viral moments on that app, right? It's put in compilations to this day. And so I think from there, Lamar kind of talked about how from there it was kind of, it was good from there. He talked a little bit more about, how nervous he was in his first start. He said he wasn't really that nervous. He wasn't nervous. He had butterflies, he said. And then once he got tackled the one time, now it was easy for him, he said. And he said the light bulb clicked to dominate at the same level that he did in college and high school. He said his sophomore season, so obviously the 2019 year, first game of the year, blew out the Dolphins. He remembered that and talked about it. He also said something about the city of Baltimore. He said, was asked by Kevin Hart how he responded to the city of Baltimore welcoming him and how he's responded to that. And he said, they dedicate everything, their life, to the Ravens in Baltimore. He said, quote, if we're having a bad season and stuff, the city is chaotic. Firsthand experience here. People care about this team. Ravens fans care about this team, right? It is from August, the preseason, to hopefully February, but, December, January, whenever the season ends, man, this city is all about the Ravens, and it was all in good fun, right? That's what that whole conversation was. But it's cool to kind of see Lamar open up like this and tell his story a little bit. Talked about the most difficult adjustment of coming into the NFL and being a star like he is. And he said, quote, just being a leader. I'm really not outspoken, like being vocal with my guys, like motivational speech. I don't have that. I lead by example. I go out there. I'm going to work hard. I expect that out of you. But as I've been growing in the league, it's like, nah, you've got to talk to the guys. And yeah, I mean, look, I've said it many different times. We've seen Lamar grow as a leader exponentially. And while he is not that rah-rah guy, he's not going to be the guy that, was in the middle of the huddle pregame like Roquan is or like Ray Lewis was. He's not, and that's okay. There are different types of leadership styles, but we've certainly seen Lamar grow more vocal. We have heard the behind the scenes from his teammates and coaches about what he does to help his team get better. But he also understands that, hey, is I do grow in this role, I have to be more vocal. That's what Lamar, alluded to there. So, it's been awesome to see Lamar grow in that aspect. And, I think we're going to continue to see it as he continues on here at the NFL level. Coming up in the second part of the show, we'll round out what Lamar Jackson had to say with Kevin Hart, and then we'll dive into some under-the-radar Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews updates that got swept under the rug because the Ravens signed someone named Jaire Alexander. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Now, Monarch Money is more than just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center, so you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building up your wealth. And for me, having everything in one app makes it so much easier to manage my money day to day. Back in the day, I had all these apps and everything had a specific use. And I'm like, okay, did I check this one? Did I check this one? What about this one? Monarch consolidates it all for you, which is absolutely incredible. It helps me hit my financial goals in a lot simpler fashion. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you. Monday edition of the show. 4th of July week is that's coming up. It's crazy. It is almost July. Obviously, we're here on June 30th, but man, where's the time gone? I mean, look, I'm happy it's flown by the way it has. It feels like it was just yesterday the Ravens were in Buffalo. It also feels like it was like 5 years ago the Ravens were in Buffalo, and we haven't seen Lamar Jackson play in forever. So getting ready to see this team play again. Really excited for it. We got a lot of exciting things also coming down the pipeline for this season on Locked On Ravens. So can't wait to share and show you everything we got coming on here for this year on Locked On Ravens. But let's continue diving into what Lamar Jackson and Kevin Hart had to say during, again, Lamar Jackson and Kevin Hart. It was part of the LOL network. So if you haven't checked out the interview, be sure to. Lamar, Kevin Hart, awesome interview. But the Ravens, we know that they have squandered some opportunities, and that's to say the least, of winning Super Bowls over the last couple of years. So Kevin Hart asked Lamar, how close do you feel like you are to a Super Bowl? And he said, quote, extremely close. As if I've been getting older in the league, my mindset has been different and the game has gotten a lot easier for me. And Lamar's been very consistent in saying that. This is not just a thing he said in this interview. He's been saying that for a while now about how the game has slowed down for him, and he truly does feel like it's gotten a lot easier. And, this is year 8 for Lamar, right? Lamar's been in the league for 7 seasons. He started for 6. And which, well, by the way, it's crazy to say. But, you look at it, he has improved. And you look at improvements, box score stats and touchdowns, interceptions, yada, yada. Yeah, he's improved in those areas over time. That'll fluctuate, though. That's especially after he had a 36 touchdown year in 2019, a second season. That's not going to go up every single year, right? There are going to be some fluctuations in your box score stats. We've seen him improve in so many different areas, whether it be decision making, efficiency numbers, turnover ratio, even the small stuff like protecting his body, right? That got better after his rookie season, and really that hasn't been a big issue for Lamar. He understands. He's smart in that regard, and he's smart in so many other ways as well. But to me, I think that Lamar's not kidding here. Like it does look like he's playing a game, like he's playing at a different speed than a lot of guys at times, right? I mean, it just feels that way to me. It looks that way. You pull up the film, pull up the highlights, and Lamar's doing stuff that these defenders are moving in slow motion to him, I'm sure, at times. He also talked about the end of last season. Kevin Hart asked him about that, and he specifically asked about the conversation with Mark Andrews. And Lamar said, quote, "I went up to him like, man, we all played a part in this game. I had my turnovers. We shouldn't even be in this situation. I know you've been busting your butt all season. Despite what you've been through, you're just going to have to bounce back. We can't dwell on that." Right? So words of encouragement. Lamar, and he's never been somebody to throw teammates under the bus, even when it's not Lamar's fault. He takes accountability. He takes responsibility. He says, as a leader, I have to be better. I have to get my team right. He said, well, if I did this, then we wouldn't have been in that situation, much like he talked about with Mark there. I mean, that is the ultimate mark. I mean, we've seen plenty of quarterbacks throw teammates under the bus, one of which is now in the AFC North, in Aaron Rodgers, who did it routinely with the Jets and, had moments with the Packers as well. Lamar's not like that. Lamar, and we, like he said, we talked about the leader aspect in the first part of the show. Lamar, there are so many different ways to define a leader, right? There are so many different ways to define who a leader is and what a leader does. And I think everybody looks at that as, oh, he is the guy that pumps up the team huddle. He's the one that's delivering that motivational speech. Lamar does lead by example, and it's not just on the field. How he carries himself, how he takes accountability. There are so many things that Lamar does that fly under the radar as a leader. I believe he's one of the best leaders in the NFL. I truly do. Because I don't equate leadership to being a rah-rah guy. I'm going to pump you up in the middle of the huddle. Those guys are great. Roquan is awesome. Roquan Smith is great at doing that, and he also is a very good leader in his own right. But I think the way Lamar carries himself, the way Lamar does things, that is the ultimate teammate, the ultimate person, and, of course, the ultimate football player. He is the triple crown. He is the triple crown of being a leader. And, you can't ask for much more, especially from a guy that you expect to be a leader and who, I give him a lot of credit. He has grown tremendously in that vocal aspect of it, right? It's not like Lamar is just completely silent. He's not anymore. But he gives you so much more than that, and it's been truly awesome to watch his transformation there. But let's now dive into the underrated tight end updates we got from Ian Rapoport. Again, this was a couple of weeks ago, and again, the Jaire Alexander signing had me scrambling all over the place. I mean, just out of nowhere. I guess maybe not, because Lamar said, hey, go get him, and they did. But it swept a lot of stuff under the radar, and, I've seen a couple other people talk about these updates now, and I wanted to dive into him here because I haven't had a chance to talk about him yet. So Ian Rapoport on NFL Network, obviously NFL Insider, he had some updates on both Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews. So in terms of Isaiah Likely, he said, quote, "I know the Ravens really see him as the future of the tight end position, even if they still see Mark Andrews with a big role this year. Are they able to lock him up at some point before the season? Will be really, really interesting." So again, there's no confirmation that like something will get done here by the Ravens and Isaiah Likely before the season starts. But again, to hear Rapoport say the Ravens see him as the future of their tight end position, I know some people, that might just be like a little over the head. Oh, yeah, right, duh. But I kind of view that personally as, well, if they see him as the future, that means someone might not be there in 2026. And I think we know who I'm all referring to there. But I think the other thing is, if they do get him under contract before the season starts, that to me, I think is a really big thing. And I'll explain why. Let's look at the top tight end contracts in the NFL right now. So let's just go by average annual value. George Kittle makes the most right now at 19.1. Trey McBride comes in second at 19. Travis Kelce, 17.1. TJ Hawkinson is 16.5. And Mark Andrews is 14. So those are your top five right now. If Isaiah Likely signed before the season, I think it would be a bargain deal for the Ravens. Like I'd probably say the Ravens could get away with giving Isaiah 3 for 30. Right? I'd go 10 million, maybe even 3 for 27. Right? You can get a little frisky with it. Now the salary cap goes up, so maybe it might be around 3 for 33, 3 for 36. But I could see them average annual value wise, because right now, some of the guys that are making around $9 to $12 million include Hunter Henry, Dawson Knox, Taysom Hill, Dallas Goedert, Juwan Johnson, Noah Fant, Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz. Those are the guys in that $9 to $12 million range. I would take Isaiah Likely over every single player on that list. Every single player. The only one you could maybe even make a slight argument for is Dallas Goedert, although he's coming to the end of his career, at least, he's near it more than he was. He's 30 now. Evan Ingram, couple decent years in Jacksonville. He's 31 now. So, what are you going to do with that? I'd take Isaiah Likely over every single player on that list, but Isaiah Likely hasn't truly broken out yet. So I think that you could get him in that $9 to $12 million range before the season starts. If he has this breakout 2025, like I think a lot of people are expecting him to, if he truly does break out in that way, I mean, you're probably looking at top 10, 7 tight end money for him, especially if Mark Andrews alongside him does really well as well. I mean, you're looking at, and that's why you can't keep both, right? I think they're both going to demand pretty high contracts, but then you're probably looking in the Andrews, Njoku, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth range. And again, I'd take Isaiah over every one of those guys right now. Mark is the one that would be the conversation point where Mark is the more proven guy, but I'm talking more future. I'd take Isaiah over every guy on that list. Again, it's like, who would you take over him at this point, right? Trey McBride's a great young player. Laporta hasn't gotten paid yet, so that's really not there. But like, I think if Likely breaks out and he's not signed before the season starts, you could really see him in that $13 to $17 million per season range. Now, again, the contract, the salary cap is going to play a big part in that, where it's going to go up, TV deals, etc. So like we talk about with Lamar Jackson, when he signed that mega extension, that was like, oh, that's a heck of a lot of money. Well, now with the cap going up and all these other quarterbacks signed, it's the 10th highest quarterback contract. It's a bargain considering what these other guys have gotten. So I think if he does get in that like $14 to $17 million range after the breakout, one, extremely well deserved, and two, that contract's going to look like a steal. Let's say it's a 4-year deal, that deal will probably look like a steal after 1 year or maybe two max. But that to me is the big conversation point there for Isaiah Likely. So we will see, but Ian Rappaport saying that Isaiah Likely, he's the Ravens see him as the future of the tight end position. Well, good for the Ravens because I agree with them too. So coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about the Mark Andrews update that Ian Rappaport gave, as well as talking about can the Ravens uphold the standard that has been set for them by previous teams. Stay tuned, plenty coming away on the show. Back here on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher rounding out this Monday edition of the show with you. Appreciate everybody for being here on this 4th of July holiday week. 4th of July coming up on Friday, but we are giving you episodes. We will have an episode for you on Friday, even though it will be 4th of July. So a happy early 4th of July to everybody out there. But let's dive into the Ian Rappaport update on Mark Andrews, right? Mark Andrews, very controversial figure over the course of this offseason for the Ravens fan base. I'd say very split down the middle in terms of the opinions on Mark. If you've been listening to me here on Locked On Ravens, you know mine, and that is that I believe Mark is still a top 5 tight end, but this is probably his last year in Baltimore. Now, apparently there's still trade interest in Mark Andrews. Ian Rappaport saying, quote, "We'll see what happens. There is still trade interest from some teams the Ravens have not bitten. Keeping Lamar Jackson there, no doubt, is paramount." So we talked about that. And he even talked about Lamar a little bit, saying the team has had discussions with Lamar, but we've known that, right? Eric DeCosta called it introductory in terms of the stage of where that is at right now. But interesting, there's still trade interest. I don't think there's any benefit to trading Mark right now. I think if you were to do that, it would have had to be before the draft. I just think that what's a 3rd, 4th, 5th round pick going to do for you now when you can have the production of Mark for a year more and then just lose him for a comp pick? You're probably going to get a 4th to 5th round comp pick for him, depending on the contract he signs. I just take the year of Mark and get the comp pick as opposed to, moving off of him, not having that production. It's essentially pushing back the year the pick is in for a year of an all-pro tight end. Like that's not really a discussion for me, but I think it's interesting that teams are still interested in Mark. So I'm not expecting, again, it had to happen before the draft. I think there is no benefit to Baltimore for trading him at this point. Keep him, have him play out this year. Hopefully he has a great year, and then, they probably choose Likely and move on from Andrews, and that's a tough conversation, but, you have to prioritize the future, and Likely is more than ready for that role. So that's where I am on that. I think, again, Mark will have a bounce-back season. I'm expecting it personally. If he doesn't, well, then I'm wrong. But I truly do believe Mark has it in him. He's still a very talented player, and it's just the fact that, back in January, which is, it feels like eons ago, that's the last thing we saw from Mark was his fumble in the open field and the drop 2-point conversion, right? So everybody sees that and the other playoff struggles Mark has had and are just going to automatically default sometimes to, man, well, that's who Mark is. And sure, in the playoffs, yeah, Mark has not been up to snuff. I'm not going to shy away from that. It's the truth. But, he's still a guy that helps open up this offense in so many different ways. And I think the Ravens are a worse team without him. So that's where I am on that. But I think now the conversation will shift it into the Ravens. Can they uphold a standard, right? Marlon Humphrey had some interesting comments a couple weeks ago during minicamp about how he wants to get the defense back to that like 2000s Ray Lewis type deal, even with he knows the Ravens have Lamar, right? And it's offense this, Lamar is exciting. The offense is exciting. Look, it's a lot more exciting than the 2000s offense outside of Qadry Ismail, by the way, who was the lifeblood of that offense. All right, we're going to talk with him about that this week, and I'll tell him I said that. But again, like with Lamar and all these other guys, like, yeah, this is the most offensive we have seen this Ravens team in their history. There's no doubt about it. They've had good offenses in the past. I'll never forget that Gary Kubiak 2014 zone off. Like, they were what could have been if Gary Kubiak stayed in Baltimore instead of going to Denver. But that's a whole different conversation for maybe a history. We can take a trip down memory lane and have another episode on that one day. But I want to talk more about the standard Marlon talked about for the defense in particular. And look, his mindset, a lot of people like. I loved it, where he was talking about the turnovers and essentially said that, you're not playing well enough if you're not forcing turnovers and getting the ball back to your offense and getting in those opportunities to help your team out in that way. In the playoffs in particular, that's been a struggle for them. And, this standard has been set, with that 2000s defense, with the way that they won the Super Bowl back in 2012, 2013. And I actually had longtime Ravens PA announcer Bruce Cunningham on the show. It was an awesome conversation. So if you haven't checked it out, be sure to do so. But I'm going to play a couple clips, one of which we talked about Anquan Bolden, because he went on the OG's podcast. And he talked about coming to Baltimore and having his reality flipped upside down. And Bruce told a story about Bolden and Ray Lewis and kind of how things were back then. And I say back then, it was only, it was less than 15 years ago. But still, I want to play that clip from Bruce, and then we'll talk about that standard on the other side. He said in Arizona, the offense ran the practices, right? That was the unit that dominated. No, and that was it. And he came to Baltimore, and he said, man, it was the exact opposite when it came to the Ravens. He said the guys were cheap shotting defenses. The defense was cheap shotting guys after plays and, doing all this crazy stuff, just punking them essentially. And Bolden said, man, if you do what you just did to that guy to me, I'm going to fight everybody here. Like I'm not putting up with that. I'm not doing this. And Bolden having one idea of how it was in one area and then coming to Baltimore and your reality is just checked pretty quickly.
When you come to Baltimore in that era, the first thing you have to do is you have to go through number 52, because number 52 was waving the banner. It was his shop, and it was interesting because Bolden, especially his first year here, Bolden was a very stern veteran presence. You got that from Bolden a lot. Bolden is one of the few guys that would stare back at Ray. He'd stare right back at him, and that was always interesting to watch. They'd never say anything, but I saw what was going on here. They were kind of stalking each other, but it worked out. I mean, they both got rings, and they're both excellent players. Bolden really solidified the receiving core that year just because of his veteran status.
Yeah, and I mean, look, for Bolden, for Ray, like, obviously defense has been this team's calling card forever, right? It's their organizational calling card is the defense and how physical, those dominant teams. And they have had those in the Lamar Jackson era defensively. That 2023 defense was one of the best in history. But it's also the way that Bolden set the tone offensively. You know, in that same OG's interview, he talked about how he wanted Ray Rice to run to his side so he could block and impose his will. Like, those are the types of things that the Ravens have to do. And we know even today, like, the Ravens are still a physical defense, right? Roquan Smith embodies that. Kyle Hamilton embodies that. Marlon himself embodies that. There are plenty of guys that embody that mindset. And I think the Ravens can uphold that standard, not just defensively, but offensively as well. And obviously on the offensive side of the ball, Lamar Jackson is the great one, right? We talked about him all show. And Bruce had a great comparison, an awesome story about Lamar Jackson, comparing him to an NBA legend. So I want to play that clip because, you know, the significance of it, you know, it's definitely something that I thought was significant. So I'll play that clip here. Can Lamar get better? Like, it is scary to think about what a better version of Lamar looks like as the season he had.
There are some things he could do better. I'd like to see a lot more accuracy on the deep balls. You know, I think we all would. I mean, he's not perfect in that regard. He also has a tendency to throw behind guys, especially when they're coming across the middle. So, yeah, I mean, he's better than everybody else, but, I mean, there's still things he can get better at. But I like to describe him this way. When I was in middle school in Virginia, we got a team in the ABA called the Virginia Squires, and they signed Dr. J when he was 20 years old, signed him out of UMass. I would go see Dr. J play at age 20, age 21, and leave that building thinking, you know what, I've seen stuff tonight I've never seen before. And, Kevin, I never had that feeling again until I saw Lamar Jackson play live. That same feeling within me. This is the level of player that we're talking about here. This is, you know, at some point, he's going to win a championship or two or three. And at that point, when he gets those rings, you might have to start weighing him against Unitas, you know, in terms of impact to this city and to the franchise. And, you know, right now, Unitas is all over it because Unitas has the rings. If Lamar gets some rings, I think it's a fair comparison to make eventually down the road.
Yeah, and look, I mean, for Lamar, he was a lot better as a deep ball passer last season. Certainly not perfect, and look, nobody is. You know, he had a couple of rough deep ball years the couple of years prior, and, you know, to his credit, got back on track there. But I think even still, not every deep ball's on Lamar, not every deep ball's on the wide receiver. There is some level of shared blame to go around with that. But Bruce is right, where, like, there are still areas Lamar can improve, but that's the type of player we're talking about, where he's better than everybody else. He still has room to improve because everybody does, but he's that good. And then the Dr. J comparison of, like, having that feeling of, man, I've seen stuff I've never seen before. Like, to me, and that's something that I always try to put myself in, like, the mindset of, man, imagine this is your first time seeing Lamar do this, because I just get so numb to it at times when we're witnessing greatness from him week after week. And we see it so often, like, especially being a Ravens fan and watching all these years of Ravens football and offenses that were terrible and not exciting. Lamar brings that excitement, right? Everyone who's a fan of this team, right? Lamar brings that excitement. But I want to be able to relish that in the moment and not just be like, oh, yeah, that's another Lamar play. No, we're witnessing greatness here. So it's a standard both offensively and defensively. I think everybody in that organization upholds it very well. And I think that, you know, there's one goal. They want to win a Super Bowl, and hopefully they can do that this season. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I'll be right back here tomorrow with more Ravens content. So be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form, follow along and subscribe in audio form. And I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.